Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Watchman Report on this Monday, July 7th, 2025. This is your host, Marco Ponce of BeingJustified.com with the Monday edition of the Watchman Report. And today is rather special because we are going to be having an interview at the end of our report with the new author of a biography on MBS. We've highlighted this book before. I actually got the chance to interview Karen Elliot House yesterday after she got out of church, and it was for about an hour. So we'll be premiering that interview for the first time at the end of the report today. And that book on MBS is releasing tomorrow, which I also have coming in the mail. But one of the things we're also going to talk about is this week should be very interesting because notice who just landed in Washington, D.C. today. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is set to meet with Donald Trump in about an hour and a half from when I am talking right now at 5 p.m. Eastern time, privately at the White House. They're going to be talking about Iran, and they're going to be talking about the Gaza ceasefire deal. And you're going to see that Mike Huckabee, the Israeli ambassador from America, has said before he left with Benjamin on his plane, he said, expect some surprises. Also in the area of expanding the peace accords, the circle of peace, as Bibi says. But again, remember what I've been saying since 2020. If you're new to the Watchman Report, remember, a faithful ambassador's health. I've been sounding the alarm since 2020, proving all things, rightly dividing the word of truth, that the Prince of the Covenant, the Beast, and Seventh King of Revelation 17 is MBS. And when he confirms the covenant with Israel,
it's the final countdown.
And we're almost there. 5 years later, here we are. With all that said, welcome to the Watchman Report. And speaking of the final countdown, you know what I just noticed recently in regards to that song that was originally created by a band called Europe? They just made a remix from a gentleman called David Guetta, and he actually made a 2025 remix. And this is the official cover to it. And what you can see is the horizon along with a corona. This is a remix of that song, The Final Countdown, that was for 2025. Like I said, y'all, we are in a very interesting window right now. Since 2020, we've been on Operation Warp Speed to the end, but we're in a very interesting window. You know, I have been on record to say that in this presidential term of 4 years with Donald Trump, I have said in this term, we are starting the real biblical end of the world, which is Israel's final prophetic 70th week from the book of the prophet Daniel. We are almost there. But it's quite interesting, I should say, that they make a remix for the final countdown from Europe by David Guetta this year. And it was released on May 9th, 2025. And when you look at May 9th, it is day 129 of the year, and 129 is 201 with octal counting. Don't forget, we are living Event 201 to the end from that old serpent and his Society of Judas, the Jesuit order, which equals 201 as well. Again, what I include here is the official artwork from the remix for the final countdown. That was released this year, when the real final countdown can begin. Like I've said, we're in a very tight window. I think it's either this year or next year that we're going to start the final countdown. And you can see this here. This is rather interesting. It definitely caught my attention. That's watching. And note what I put here from the book of Habakkuk, where it says, though it tarry, talking about the final countdown, end of the world, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. But either way, let us not tarry and get to the big updates for today, because point number one that we're going to discuss is Bibi landing in D.C. today to meet with Trump privately. There are going to be no public meetings with the press today between Trump and Bibi or any of those things. Normally you expect Bibi, he's going to do a presser with Trump and then maybe interviews from the press directly. But in this case, it's just a private dinner tonight. So we're going to discuss that. And point number two is an Israeli team was sent out to Qatar for a ceasefire deal with Hamas to bring an end to the Gaza war, which is much needed before we get to what I call the beast peace to start the end. But as we conclude today's report, we are going to premiere my 1 hour plus interview with Karen House on her new book on Mohammed bin Salman that is going to be releasing tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So with all that said, let's get started with this particular headline that caught my attention. You know, I expect some surprises. Let's see how this week pans out. But before Bibi left Israel to come to America, this was mentioned by the Times of Israel, where it says Netanyahu leaving for D.C. He said, "We're working for Gaza deal on our terms. Hamas won't be there." Because remember, Saudi Arabia says that before peace with Israel, they want Hamas out of Gaza. And Bibi is trying to accommodate, as you could see. And notice what else he ended with. This is always coming up because that is what starts the end. It is the crux of the matter. We are going to see the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27 with the Prince of the Covenant, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, when he confirms the covenant with Israel. But notice this. It says here, chance, he says chance, by the way, there's a chance to greatly, not just any old expansion, to greatly expand the peace accords. Oh, that's what I'm watching for. But another thing that was very odd is that he brought Mike Huckabee on his plane, the Wing of Zion. Here goes Mike Huckabee, the Israeli ambassador from America. And before he also left to come to America and meet with Trump, along with Bibi in his plane, we do see the following here from All Israel News from Jesuit Joel Rosenberg, who has blocked me on his Telegram twice. All Israel News equals 201. He's another Jesuit. But either way, I do want you to take a note of what Mike Huckabee has to say here. He does note one of the quotes that they got here. Mike said, "Expect surprises in the Middle East." Don't forget who's in the surprise business. That old subtle serpent, the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. But either way, I did want you to hear from Mike Huckabee before he left to America for this very interesting week. Check it out.
Ambassador Huckabee, thank you for granting us this interview.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to get to be with you.
We are just a few days ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump's third visit and third meeting within 6 months. And I wonder, should we expect an announcement regarding release of hostages and a ceasefire agreement?
Well, we all hope that's on the agenda. We hope it's going to happen.
We hope it's going to happen, and we're looking forward to happen sometime next week.
It's certainly something that the Americans want to see happen, something President Trump wants, something Prime Minister Netanyahu and the people of Israel want. The question is, do the people who run Hamas, do they want it? Do they want this to end? I hope they do, because they're the only ones holding up something from bringing all the hostages home, every last one of them. So
I just wonder, you said all of the hostages, but it appears that the U.S. is now trying to pursue the agreement of only releasing some of the hostages of a short-term ceasefire agreement. And I wonder why not trying to have a comprehensive agreement that will bring all of the hostages back home.
I don't think anybody knows yet what the details of any particular arrangement would be just yet. So let's be patient. Next week should give us some answers to that, but I can't answer as to exactly what is on the table. Simply not capable of disclosing that today. But I would say stay tuned and watch what happens in Washington next week.
what should we expect? Is it going to be a roadmap of a new Middle East Abraham Accords, peace with Syria? What should we expect?
I think the president's original Abraham Accords were so historic, and it set the framework for what is about to happen in the coming months and years.
Has any other country suggested to you recently, as a result of this, that they want to join the Abraham Accords?
Yes. So we have some really great countries in there right now, and I think we're going to start loading them up because Iran was the primary problem.
Be prepared to see some surprising things happen in the Middle East with a very significant realignment. I think it's because something has happened with President Trump back in office. People now see that here is a person who means what he says what he means. If he makes a promise, he keeps it. Keep your eyes open to the future, because I think you're going to see a number of states that once were maybe states with hostility with Israel, but there's going to be normalization. There's going to be trade agreements. There's going to be security and peace agreements. And it's going to be a different Middle East. And President Trump will get the credit for that, because he envisioned looking at things differently and doing things differently.
Oh, man. So let's stick around to see what happens this week. And like I said, today was a very interesting day because it leaves 177 days in the year. The Jesuit order equals 177. Don't forget, Trump is Jesuit educated. Bibi's got Jesuit name overlaps with gematria. But don't forget, they both jabbed up their nations. But again, another date that we're going to look at is tomorrow as well, in light of the beginning of the war in 2023 with Gaza. But you can see that's most likely why Bibi went to go see his fellow soldier at the White House. But one thing I wanted to make sure that you knew was this. Nothing is going to be announced today. All that is happening today, as Bibi arrives, is a private dinner with Trump, and it's most likely, I would imagine, having to do with Iran, the hostages, and also coming to an end with the Gaza war. As you can see from the public available presidential agenda or itinerary, we can see that at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, he does have on his agenda meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel for a state dinner. But I now want to get to the Associated Press, giving you the top 3 things to know about this meeting that's about to transpire. Check it out.
Here are 3 important things to know about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting at the White House on Monday with President Donald Trump. First, the 2 leaders will be talking about Iran. President Trump said last week that they would be celebrating their, quote, great victory over Iran. He was alluding to airstrikes by the United States last month when the U.S. joined Israel in bombing Iran's 3 major nuclear sites. 2, the war between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. President Trump is very interested in seeing that war come to an end. Israel and Hamas are talking about a ceasefire proposal that is on the table, and I think that President Trump wants to try to move things along with this meeting. And number 3, as a White House reporter, one of the interesting things about the meeting Monday is that everything is happening behind closed doors. Usually there is a component that happens behind closed doors because leaders need to conduct their business in private. But with this meeting Monday, the press is not allowed to witness or photograph or even shoot video of the Prime Minister arriving. They will not be appearing in front of the press for what's known as a spray, which is just a few minutes where reporters get to see them seated at a table and potentially asking questions. And at this point, it's unclear why things have been arranged that way.
Oh, we're going to find out pretty soon. And as of today, Bibi on his Instagram posted this picture after his morning exercise and coffee, preparing to meet with Donald Trump today at that state dinner. Another thing that we see from the Middle East is the following headline where it says Netanyahu says that he believes Trump can help seal ceasefire deal. Because clearly, absolutely abundantly clear right now, Donald Trump wants to put an end to wars. Do not forget, we covered on one of our recent reports, one of his social media posts that talked about, congratulations world, here comes peace. So he was trying to declare peace, especially after the 12-day war with Iran. But he wants to iron out Gaza. And you can see here, White House says ending Gaza war, utmost priority for Trump. Listen, forget about the people dying in Texas with the flood. He's trying to get this beast piece going, man. Remember, promises made, promises kept. Yeah, to the devil. But now, note the following here from the great city of Revelation 17:18, which reigneth over the kings of the earth, the Vatican whore. From Vatican News, they announced the following today. Israel-Hamas ceasefire talks continue for a second day in Qatar. There has been no breakthrough, okay? And I'm sure that's kind of ticking off Donald Trump. You can see Donald, he's like, listen, I would imagine if everything went perfectly, Donald Trump would want that Bibi came to America with ending or ceasefiring the Gaza war before he even left. But right now, we're going to get to some other stuff that right before I got on, there is a big old kerfuffle that happened in northern Gaza where multiple soldiers have been killed, and it looks like they might have kidnapped some people in an ambushing. So it's not like Gaza's getting any better right now. It's actually got a little interesting right now, right before I got onto this report. But tomorrow is another date that we need to look at, because from Saturday, October 7, 2023, when the war started, to Tuesday is 640 days after the war began. Now notice, without the zero value, that is 64. And Israel with gematria, there goes the cipher, there goes the math, is 64. So tomorrow should be interesting. But note what we saw here from Iran International saying the following here on X. They said, have a good night. Monday is going to be a strange and interesting day. Stay tuned. That was said by Israeli diplomat in Geneva in an X post in Persian. Israeli Prime Minister is expected to meet with Donald Trump today. So again, let's just see what he's talking about there. Is it about to get strange? We're going to find out, because one of the things that I did want to cover is, like I said, right before I got on, there was a very serious incident that was unfolding in northern Gaza where over 15 plus IDF soldiers got ambushed by Hamas. Some of them have been thought to have been kidnapped as well. So that is developing right now. It's a fluid situation. So here we have a couple things happening in Gaza. We have Qatar doing ceasefire talks, and we still have this that just developed as of tonight. But speaking of Gaza and Palestine, another thing that really caught my attention that I got to chat with Karen about right before we started recording our interview, because she used to be a Wall Street Journal reporter for the Middle East. But she talked to me about Wall Street's breaking news on a new Palestinian offer for peace with Israel. It says Hebron's sheikhs proposed to leave the Palestinian Authority and join the Abraham Accords. So there's a lot of things happening in the Middle East. Remember, we're on warp speed to the end. But another thing you need to pay attention to is when they mention this particular statement. Sometimes you will hear right now, the day after, the day after, the day after. What they're trying to talk about is the day after the war ends. What will happen the day after the war with Gaza ends? But it could also be coupled with the beast piece that starts the end of the world. So the day after the end of the world starts is also what I'm thinking. But you can see here from Israeli Defense Minister Katz, he said day after will include Hamas-less Gaza. In other words, they don't want Hamas in Gaza anymore. It says here, expelled terror leaders, Mideast cooperation, talking about expanding the peace accords. He also talked about, it says here, from Jerusalem Post, IDF would withdraw from much of 75% of Gaza under its control. So at this point, it's all, I actually talked to Karen about this yesterday, and I said 70%. So I guess I was wrong there. There's 75% of Gaza under IDF control right now, according to Katz, which would definitely know. And it says here, continuing war into remaining 25% would unnecessarily endanger the Israeli hostages. At this point, I am surprised after 600 plus days that there's any hostages left, man. Either way, we're working up some beast peace. Do not forget This Gaza war is helping displace the Palestinians to help part Gaza's land coming up with what's looking to be included with the deal with MBS to part Gaza's land, what I call the Beast Piece. And notice who else is talking about this here. Israeli ambassador to the Ukraine recently has been quoted from a Ukrainian source saying Israel could strike deals with, note the following, and why it catches my attention, Syria, which a lot of people are thinking about Syria right now in regards to joining the Abraham Accords, especially to what Trump has done with lifting the sanctions against it from America. But notice, we have deals with Syria, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia. That is the one that I'm looking forward to. But now, as you can see, we're working up some Beast Piece, and recently promoted by the Saudi Post on X, you can see here, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace said the following of the kingdom recently. They said the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia adopts a smart strategy that balances diverse partnerships. Oh, for sure. The dragon is giving them his power. It says here, in an increasingly turbulent and uncertain global system. Remember, this is order out of chaos with the devil's mystery of iniquity, which doth already work. And we're coming to the end of that mystery of iniquity pretty soon, that will culminate in the kingdom of the beast, the one world government, religion, and currency by the middle of the tribulation. But one of the other things that we got to see from the Trump administration today with the Department of State and Trump's Marco Rubio is the following here. U.S. State Department officially removes one of these organizations tied to Syria, okay, as a terrorist organization on their list, okay? You can clearly see that Trump, just like he said in Saudi Arabia, oh, the things that I do for the crown prince. Remember, he's trying to get the deal done to start the end of the world. It involves this man, but he's trying to satisfy this man, and I guess it's calling for lifting the sanctions on this man and removing some of the terrorist organizations associated to this man that was on the State Department list. So again, we see more things from Donald Trump, I would imagine, that are being done in order for getting other countries onto the Abraham Accords, just like Syria, which you're going to hear about as well in our interview coming up with Karen House. But one of the other things I wanted to remind you of is, if you're new to the report, don't forget, we're on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Rumble, X, Facebook, Kick, Twitch, YouTube. But do not forget, we back up all our reports to our website at beingjustified.com/Watchman report. If you want the news updates in real time, go to our Telegram. That's my #1 spot. #2 spot is our X at Being Justified. And my #1 recommendation, truly, is joining our free email newsletter on the homepage at the bottom, or the blog on the right rail at beingjustified.com, so you can be notified via email whenever we come out with brand new content. Now, as we always like to do, as a faithful ambassador called to warn every man, this is what God has to say about those that are not in the book of life. It says here, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life, that is the Lamb's book of life, was cast into the lake of fire. I don't need to give you any understanding on that. That is self-explanatory. If you're not in that book, the Lamb's book of life, you will be cast into a lake of fire. And like I've been saying, look up. The Bible also says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. The sun is the eternal wrath of God. That is why the sun was darkened from the 6th to the 9th hour, when the power of the sun was placed on the soul of the Lord Jesus Christ while at the cross, approximately 3 hours, paying for my sins as the Father's perfect burnt offering. That is how you prove that the sun is the lake of fire, and that is the second death. But now, I want to help you get your name in the book of life. This is where the gospel is today, in Romans chapter 3, because remember, there's a lot of people promoting other gospels, which is not another, and the book of Galatians says that they are accursed of God. The gospel today is in Romans 3, not Romans 10, not 1 Corinthians 15, and not John 3:16. And remember, faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And the word of God is very pure, and no lie is of the truth. And I'm also here to tell you that any other Bible in English after the King James has at least one lie, if not many. So get yourself a KJV. And now let us go to Romans 3, where it says the following: for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You want to know how you can prove why everybody dies? For the wages of sin is death. That's it right there. Everybody's sin. That just proves why everybody dies. Being justified, that is the righteousness of God. Freely, it's a free gift today, and not of works, lest any man should boast, by his grace. Through the redemption, that's forgiveness of sins, that is in Christ Jesus. That's why you believe in Jesus, whom God, that is the Father, has set forth to be a propitiation. That means God the Father sent his only begotten Son forth to be made sin for us who knew no sin, through faith in his blood. Do not forget God's definition for the word faith. This is the definition. Faith is the substance, his blood, of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Remember, God the Father has faith in the blood of his only begotten Son. So should you, to declare his righteousness, not our righteousness. Remember, the faith of Jesus is the righteousness of God without sin, for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God, to declare, I say, at this time his righteousness, that he, God, might be just. Remember, God is just. Sin will be paid for. And if you want to reject this and you die in your sins, you will pay for your sins yourself if you want to reject the free gift God has with his Son. And it says here, and the justifier. God is the justifier of him. That is the singular person, him. That is exactly where you can point in the Word of God and prove to the people and the world that your name is in the book of life. The Bible says prove all things, and most Christians can't even prove that their name is in the book of life. Keep it real. Keep it real. Before you came to the Watchman Report, if you were asked the question, can you prove your name is in the book of life? Most cannot. Keep it real. But this is how you do it. And note the following. What must you do? Because God is the justifier of him which believeth. Trust, has faith. Those are all synonyms. Belief, trust, faith. Those are all synonyms. Believeth in Jesus. Don't forget, that is the gospel today in Romans 3. Believe in Jesus. Why do you believe in Jesus? And have faith in his blood, because his blood paid for your sins. Do not forget that. But now, I didn't want to take too long, but here we have a special interview, which I really couldn't believe I could get. And here it is. This is Karen Elliot House. She has a brand new book coming out. This woman has been in the Middle East reporting for the Wall Street Journal for over 40 years plus. She's been there since 1979, traveling back and forth and interviewing some of the highest level people in the Middle East, but also in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And you're going to get to hear from her right now when I interview her on her upcoming book called The Man Who Would Be King, Mohammed bin Salman and the Transformation of Saudi Arabia, which comes out tomorrow. So I look forward to it. I'm going to read it, and if I find anything else out that you need to know of, I will definitely mention it on the Watchman Report. But what I want to do now is take some time to premiere this interview that I did yesterday, right after Karen got out of church. So with all that said, that's going to be it for us. Enjoy this interview that I did yesterday with Karen on her new book, a biography on MBS. Check it out. Greetings, everyone. This is Marco Ponce of BeingJustified.com with the Watchman Report. And today we have a special guest. We have Karen Elliot House, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter and former Wall Street Journal publisher. We have her on today because she has a very important book that we've highlighted before on the Watchman Report that is coming out this week on Tuesday, July 8th, 2025. It is titled The Man Who Would Be King, Mohammed bin Salman and the Transformation of Saudi Arabia. Like I said, thank you, Karen, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And today, what I wanted to start with for my audience is just give yourself some time to explain to our audience a little bit of your background and some of the motivation behind this book. Because what I did also want to mention is that Karen has a previous book from 2012 also on the topic of Saudi Arabia called On Saudi Arabia, Its People, Past, Religion, Fault Lines, and Future. And today, we're definitely going to be talking about the future with the current Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. So with that said, I'll let you take the floor and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I went to Saudi Arabia the first time in 1978 when I became diplomatic correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, right after Sadat had been to Jerusalem. So the Middle East was a big issue. And my boss at the Journal said, go to these countries you're going to write about: Israel, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. So I did. And the first time I went, Saudi Arabia was a quite normal place. I had asked to interview the oil minister, and when I arrived in the country, I was taken to his house, but it turned out not to be an interview. It was a dinner party, and men and women were mixing. Alcohol was served. We watched the World Cup soccer match by satellite TV. It was everything that the religious conservatives in Saudi Arabia would have objected to, but didn't have the power then. But 2 years later, after the fall of the Shah and after the fundamentalists took control of the Mecca Mosque, the Saudi royal family, in essence, said, what do you want to leave us in power? We'll do it. So the country went under the heavy hand of religion. But having grown up in a tiny town in Texas, 900 people, with a very conservative religious father, there was nothing to me kind of frightening or off-putting about religion in Saudi Arabia. My father was not Saudi, obviously, but he could have been. No shorts, no pants, no TV, no telephone, read the Bible instead of the Quran. I had gone to church my whole life. So I enjoyed talking religion with people in Saudi Arabia after the heavy hand of religion descended. People would try to convert me. Everyone tried to convert you, gave you a Quran, etc. And I started to enjoy actually learning about Islam and talking to people about it.
Yep. And listen, that just goes to show my audience that you have a lengthy background, not only in the Middle East, but also in Saudi Arabia. So I'm very thankful that you're on to give us
nearly 50 years.
Yes, this is a very unique American female perspective in what they also like to call like the hidden kingdom, the secret kingdom, which at the time that you were visiting was not as open as it currently is at all. This is recent with the advent of the Crown Prince.
No, when I landed there once, I was not allowed to leave the airport because a single woman could not exit the airport. To be in the country, you had to be there with someone's permission. And the person who had given me permission was Prince Bandar bin Sultan, the Saudi ambassador in Washington. But somehow the message had gotten garbled. I had the visa, but I couldn't exit the airport. I had to call him to get out of the airport. So yes, people did not go. But I do want to say one thing on being a woman. Everybody always asks me, oh, wasn't it difficult? I think it was a big advantage to be a woman under the religious strictures of the 40 plus years, because as a woman, I could see Saudi women and they would have never talked to you, a man who was unrelated to them. But I could also see Saudi men, because even the very religious people were prepared to talk to and seek to educate and convert a infidel woman. But, ministers and people like that knew what American women did, so you could certainly see them, but you could even see the very conservative people.
Interesting. That is, like I said, very interesting perspective that we're getting today. One of my first questions in regards to the book is, what was your motivation behind this particular title?
Well, after my book came out in 2012, I kept going back there a couple of times a year just to keep up with what was happening in the country. And frankly, not much was. But when King Abdullah died in 2015 and his half-brother King Salman ascended, he elevated his son to deputy crown prince. And so in 2016, when I was there, I obviously asked to see him, and he did see me. And so we had a off-the-record conversation for about 3 hours. And then in 2017, I was back. He runs a future investment forum in the kingdom. And I heard him perform there. And I decided, he was very interesting. And where he was young, he was unlike any Saudi I'd ever met. He loved to stand out, and most Saudis like to blend in. They don't have that American individualism that me, myself, and I, look at me, the Donald Trump syndrome. So I saw him only briefly that time, not less than an hour. And I said to him, your picture is all over on every building and every hotel lobby, he and his father and his grandfather. I said, but you're a cardboard cutout. Nobody knows anything about you, because he was the sixth son of the king, so he shouldn't have amounted to anything in a hierarchical society. And young Saudis, people didn't know much about him because he hadn't been, crown prince or anything. They hadn't watched him come up. He was 29 years old. And I said, I would like to talk to you and write about where did you get these ideas? What shaped the man who is reshaping Saudi Arabia? And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. But, I kept seeing him. And then in 2019, in the fall of 2019, he said, okay, I will cooperate. In February of 2020. And of course, COVID came along, so I couldn't go there in 2020. But he did continue, and eventually they agreed to put all of my conversations with them on the record so I could actually quote him. But, it's the fact that, A, he is so powerful in the country, and B, has ambitions to be so important in the region and the world. Saudi Arabia has been an important country since, at least when FDR and the old king met, because we needed oil. But it's more so now because it's located in a part of the world that matters between Asia and Europe, and he has big ambitions to be a technological hub, to be one of 5 countries on the moon. So he's only 39 now, so he has another half century to rule. So it's important to understand him, I think, for Americans, for everybody else, but especially Americans. We don't need their oil now because of fracking in this country. That could change at some point, but the world needs their oil. So if we're going to be good allies to Europe or Asia, who need it desperately, then we have to cooperate and understand and utilize the Saudi power on our behalf, not against us.
Yep, that's all a great background in regards to the motivation. Like you said, not only the American public, but this is for the world to try and understand this man, because you said it best. I mean, it's essentially like you're a cardboard. We don't know your background. We don't know where you came from. That goes into my upcoming question here is, as you were in Saudi Arabia for the length of time that you were, did you see his rise coming from within the royal court, or did it surprise you as well, especially when he dethroned MBN?
You mean when he dethroned MBN?
Yeah, the previous crown prince.
The previous crown prince. Oh, yes, obviously by then. But did I see his rise coming when Abdullah died and he and his father became king? I didn't know. I mean, I knew that he was close to his father because the king's, when he was the governor of Riyadh, Prince Salman's two oldest sons died within a year of each other.
Oh.
And the rest of his boys from the first wife, he had 6 children, 5 boys and a girl from the first wife. They were all older and busy. And MBS is the first son from the third wife. And he was, 16 or 17. He had time on his hands and went with his father and listened and learned tribal politics. He learned what princes had done, what bad things, because his father was the royal family disciplinarian. So he had access to a lot of information. And literally on the day that Abdullah was buried, I did not know this then, but he called up 4 prominent Saudis in government and said, I want to revamp the government. And they said, well, that'll take a while. And he said, well, as long as you do it by morning. And they did. They got rid of 12, supreme councils that, in essence, stopped anything from happening and created 2 entities, one for economics and one for security. And pretty soon he was running both of them. And then he became the deputy crown prince, and then he removed his cousin and became the crown prince.
Yeah, that for me, I had him on my radar in 2020, so I was not aware of the Crown Prince rise from 2017. But when I look back at it, I said, yeah, this should have shocked anybody. The way he just, now, like you said, he was defense minister for a little bit, but then he just took over Crown Prince position. Now, that goes into my other question is, right now, what I've told my audience is rather interesting, is the idea that when MBN was Crown Prince, the deputy Crown Prince was MBS. But now that MBS is Crown Prince, even Financial Times recently highlighted this. This is like a conundrum that I've thought about. And right now, if you look at it, if you look at the hierarchical structure, there is no deputy Crown Prince behind MBS. How do you read into that?
I think that he is very driven and active and determined and doesn't believe he needs one. The real question is, who's he going to name as crown prince when his father is dead and he is the king? Because the real purpose of a crown prince in Saudi Arabia is to be the spare in waiting, that if something happens to the king, this man steps up and seamlessly takes over, at least briefly, even if, the family decides to do something else. But he has pretty much eliminated this family council of voting that King Abdullah created for the family to decide who is the, leaders going forward. So, I mean, people speculate that he might name his brother, Prince Khalid, who's the defense minister now, that he would name his cousin, a favorite of his, who runs the National Guard. But no one, as they say in Saudi Arabia, anyone who knows doesn't tell, and anyone who tells doesn't know. So I admit right up front, I do not know. I mean, if I get a chance to talk to him again, I mean, there are lots of questions like that. What's interesting about him is, I mean, he probably wouldn't answer if I said, what are you thinking about your next crown prince? Because, but mostly, when you ask him a question, he answers. When he was asked about how does he handle the religious, that he removed, in essence, from the streets and pushed the power and authority of the religious clerics off. He said, I'm going to let them engage each other, but that it's a form of coercion, trying to persuade the ones that you can persuade. I'm sorry, convincing coercion on the ones you can't just put them away in prison where they can't, or they're a lesson to others. And sure enough, some of the religious scholars have recanted and said I was wrong to be so rigidly religious. But he has succeeded at doing what King Abdullah talked about doing for 10 years when he was crown prince and then finally king, and he never could. He was too nervous about the backlash against it, and MBS just did it. That's what is to me so amazing about him. He, I repeat, is very un-Saudi. He likes to stand out. His view is that you must have big, bold ideas and push them fast. That it's dilly-dallying and timidity that destroy things. So he's lived by his. He practices what he preaches.
Most definitely. It's moving very fast in that regard. We'll get to Vision 2030 in a little bit. That's one thing I did want to touch on as far as all the projects that are being announced constantly in regards to 2030. But I guess just for the record, so my audience can understand, how many times have you physically met the Crown Prince to actually interview him?
7 times.
Okay.
And then just met him, at a dinner to shake hands once when he hosted a big dinner for the crown princes of Bahrain and Jordan and stuff. I got invited, and he was just standing there. Anybody could talk to him, so of course I did. But it wasn't an interview. But yeah, 7 times.
Okay. And one of the other questions in regards to the book itself is why the book title? Because that definitely caught my attention. And I've been on record to say, listen, I definitely see him becoming king. His father's old. I think it's 90 or something at this point.
89. He'll be 90, I believe, in December.
Yes. So I see that happening rather sooner than later.
Yeah, I do. The Crown Prince will be 40 in August. And yeah, I assume that it's not long before he is king. But the man who would be king was suggested. I can't take credit for it, but it's apparently a story about some people who in, I think, Afghanistan that pretended to be king.
It was India. I did look at. Because I just did a quick Google search, and I was like, wait a minute, there's another book title on this.
Yep. But no, it's not a new title. And an editor that worked with me on my first book is the one who actually suggested it. And my current editor and I and the agent for the book all said, yeah, that's good. The man who, because Crown Prince, this, that one is descriptive but intriguing.
Yeah. Do you think he'll take on the name just King Mohammed or something like that? Because his father's already King Salman, and he has the surname Salman.
Yeah, he would be King Mohammed. Yeah. Salman bin Abdulaziz, he's Mohammed bin Salman, so he would be King Mohammed. And presumably, Saudis, it's not just Americans that call him MBS. Saudis call him MBS too. There is an informality about him that's totally original, and certainly in the recent Saudi history. He wears a thobe, but he will wear an expensive vest over it, and
seen that
Yeezy tennis shoes, and all of this. He identifies with the under 30 crowd, and they identify with him. I have a chapter in the book called The Pied Piper. They do kind of follow him and really, see him as what they would like to be. He has made people relax. They smile. In the old Saudi people were so tense, what with the religious police watching, that there was no such thing as a man on the street interview. You could not just walk up to a Saudi and say, "Hi, I'm Karen Elliot House from the Wall Street Journal. Could I ask you a few questions?" I mean, you know, but now people are they smile at you. If you ask them a question, they ask you, "Where are you from?" They talk to you. They have that kind of informality that that he has.
You could tell. I've mentioned this a couple of times with events like even Mideast and all that stuff. You can tell that what he's trying to do in Saudi Arabia is please that younger audience that is the majority in Saudi currently. He's just essentially trying to win them over. So that's.
I think he has won them over, and I think also the point of all of this modernity and dancing Mideast concerts in the street and movies and
Yes.
Women running, jogging in the streets, all of those normal things, is because he needs a lot of Westerner expertise. And, Americans are not going to, or Europeans or most anybody doesn't want to make a commitment of, more than 1 year in which they try to get rich. To if their wife can't work or they're chained in the house, they can't drive a car. So now, I hear from Saudis who say they don't like that people like me say it's, women now have this normalcy, that it is not normal and women should not be working among men and if you visit both government offices and private offices, there are women and men going up in the elevator side by side, that would have been a horrifying occurrence 10 years ago and 20 and 30 years ago. But now it's quite normal. But there are women who refuse to do that. Their husbands refuse to let them. So there is still, if you want that, you can work in a private women's section of a private company or a ministry. You don't have to mix, but most everybody is happy to do it, the young people.
Yeah, no, that definitely looks like the case. Like you said, I've seen a lot of social media reaction in regards to promoting the Crown Prince in a very positive light. Now, in regards to the current setup in the royal court, who do you think he trusts the most in his inner ring? Do you think that's even something that's public? Because it is interesting that you do mention, it's like, I think there was a quote that he said, there's certain things in the royal court you'll never hear about,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't profess to know who he really listens to. I mean, people say Mr. Rumian, who runs the public investment fund. But, I don't, as I said in the book, that it is hard to know how, whether his advisors give him honest feedback. Do they try to, if they think he's about to make a mistake, tell him so, and how reflective he is, how much it's clear that he's intelligent, charismatic, determined to move fast and doesn't mind breaking China. But, how much can he reflect on himself and, what's going on around him and what's the best way to get something done. I sympathize with the view that if you spend too much time self-analyzing, you won't get anything done. I quoted Lee Kuan Yew, the Singaporean prime minister, in the book saying, because he was very much a leader like the Crown Prince when he transformed Singapore from, a poor Japanese, British suppressed country into the powerhouse of Asia.
Yep.
But he said something to the effect that if you just, if you're just normal, you'll be plebeian, pedestrian. You can't succeed. You have to be able to think of the impossible and say that's possible.
Yeah, I think when he was interviewed by Brett Baer, he was even already talking about Vision 2040. He's like, we're hitting certain numbers on 2030, and now once we get a little bit past some of these numbers, we're looking at 2040. So he's definitely got a vision in place. And I don't know if you addressed this in your book, but outside of, because you talked about the vast power he does wield, outside of oil prices, because we do know, I think the majority of the world would probably know that, okay, Saudi, what is Saudi? Outside of religion with Mecca and Medina, what are they? Oh, they're an oil powerhouse. So outside of oil prices in general, how else do you think MBS is projecting his power on the regional stage right now and also the world stage? How do you think it'll develop?
Well, he in my view, is clearly trying to first protect himself on the regional stage. So he, when he first became deputy crown prince, as you recall, he severed relations with Qatar. They launched the war in Yemen. Yep. He is, I quote him in my book, as saying that Ayatollah Khamenei is a modern day Hitler. I mean, he was very combative. And then he, I think, began to realize you can't kind of make everybody mad at you at the same time. And Joe Biden was calling him a pariah. So he, warmed up with China. He, having combated Russia by opening up the oil taps, which drove the prices way down, he decided to cooperate with Russia so the two of them could control production pretty much, and thus prices. And then he did diplomatic relations with Iran in March of 2023.
That one really surprised me, by the way. That one
did me.
What is this?
I was seeing him on March can't remember the precise date, but he said to me, I'm going to restore diplomatic relations with Iran. And I said, why? I mean, my teeth could have dropped out if they weren't stable. I mean, It was astounding. I would have never thought. And he said, because, the Americans are not going to, in essence, protect us. So we have to tone down. We have to get along. And he has done that during this whole Iranian crisis. I think he did it quite masterfully. He's whispered to Israel. I mean, the Israelis and Saudis share intelligence. He has, whispered to Tehran, and he sent his brother, the defense minister, to visit the Ayatollah personally.
Yeah. With a letter from the king, I believe.
Yes, a few months ago. So he's done. He's a masterfully, I would say, manipulative politician right now to protect what he's building in the kingdom. He doesn't want the oil blown up. He doesn't want all of these big projects blown up, because without the oil revenue, he can't rebuild the big projects. Yep. So, he really does need to think about protection, and he is. I think to get where he wants to go, which is relations with Israel, he's going to have to be more open and in his diplomacy. In other words, less kind of quiet.
Clandestine is what I call it. Like,
what?
It's very clandestine. It's very
clandestine. All right, that's a good word. Yes, he's going to have to be more open and overt.
Yeah. And some people are actually calling it brave. Like, I keep hearing this statement of we need more brave leaders in the Middle East, almost as if like trying to persuade him or kind of like force him into the picture. Like, we need brave new leadership. That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're chanting at MBS. Come on, man, get in the picture here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, especially the Israelis, I think. I mean, they talk to me. I have this in the book, some of them, about, he could go to Jerusalem the way Sadat did, and it would transform. I don't think he will do that. The Crown Prince is, his people say, and he told me when I asked him once about who was he like, and he said somebody, and I said, "Oh, you mean dignified?" And he said, "No, not dignified, shy." And then he said he was so shy in the second grade that he could not perform in a second grade play at his school, even though he had rehearsed with all the other kids. And his father came that day to see him, and he begged him, and he wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it. And he doesn't have that, I repeat, sort of Trump gene that wants to be constantly on stage performing. I think quiet diplomacy is more his way, but I think he is going to have to, as I put it, stand up and be counted more on how do we get from what I want, relations with Israel, to create a area of prosperity in the Middle East, from where we are. And he has made his task harder by saying very loud last September, "I will not recognize Israel until there is a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital." So that was a kind of bold and out loud statement that complicates things, I think. But I believe he actually is going to become more of a, if not the leader, a partner with Qatar and the UAE in trying to get something more done. I mean, he, as you know, got Trump to lift sanctions on Syria, even though the current leader of Syria is still on the American terrorist list.
Yeah.
Which is an odd one. But I think there might be something there. I mean, he needs real stability in Syria. He needs Iran not to be able to get back in there and cause disruption in Syria. I think he's willing to invest money in that. And the Israelis, I think, they would like, at least I keep hearing that they would like to have diplomatic relations with Syria. And I don't know the Syrian leader, so whether he is courageous enough to do that, but he might be, if whispered to by MBS the way MBS whispered to Trump, do it, so that could provide some movement, but I don't know how one gets out of, absent a Palestinian state, how they recognize Israel. Because I think their only issue is just the foreign minister has said very clearly, we don't want to rebuild Gaza just to have it blown up again.
Yeah.
Or, rebuild anything to have it blown up. We need a solution.
Yeah.
So if they could be convinced that there was a solution, a lasting solution, other than a Palestinian state, maybe they would go for it. But I understand totally why. They've got a lot to spend their money on, and they don't want to be the rich guy in the region of impoverished people. They want the prosperity to spread. So, maybe in there somewhere there is a, with MBS's leadership, there's something that he can do. But worldwide, I think, I'm sorry to go on. I think he's recognizing China and Russia. He wants a relationship with the U.S., obviously, because we're the ultimate protector. But, he is one of the key middle powers, as people call them: Indonesia, South Africa, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, that can play a bigger role, and he's got more cards to play it with in the world than anybody else. China is his biggest purchaser of Saudi oil. Russia is his partner in controlling oil prices. He can use those cards with us. Trump seems to be smart enough to know that you can't do what Biden tried to do, right off Saudi Arabia. That was a fool's errand.
Yes, one of the things, back to Trump, that really caught my attention recently was when he visited Saudi Arabia in May, and he obviously I was watching it live. He made the announcement that he was going to lift sanctions on Syria. That one really caught me off guard, but I knew it was to set up for that potential play with the Abraham Accords, potentially joining the Abraham Accords, because he's been very vocal. Benjamin Netanyahu's been very vocal of expanding the circle of peace and having more countries join the Abraham Accords. But like I tell our audience, the one that I'm chiefly watching for is the big fish, the birthplace of Islam, is Saudi Arabia. And, I've been on record to say it's probably going to be, I think, without rapid movement, but if there is rapid movement with events unfolding more rapidly, I would say either this year or next year, they're probably going to join. It seems to me that the White House administration, that the Israeli government is pushing hard right now to fulfill some of the requests from the Saudi foreign minister, saying stuff like, we need at least Gaza to ceasefire. And then there was an I-24 news piece that came out from Israel saying that from a Saudi royal court source that they want Hamas removed to normalize with Israel. So not only do they want a ceasefire, they want Hamas removed, and then at least a pathway to a Palestinian state. It doesn't have to be like day one, we're going to party.
Right.
They at least want a commitment to it. So it seems like from what was originally brought forth to the table from the Arab Peace Initiative, which has been in play before MBS, that they've kind of loosened up a little bit on the request to do an actual parting Palestinian state and just give a commitment to it. So that's what it looks like. The trajectory right now clearly looks like it's good. And like I said, not only are you hearing this from the American administration, but also the Israeli administration, and you're seeing the actions that are backing up what they're trying to say that they want to do. So you could see, like, as soon as that article came out from I-24 News about Gaza ceasefire and Hamas being removed, the same day there was another article from Israeli sources saying Benjamin Netanyahu says, I want to remove Hamas. I said, okay, so it looks like, what do you guys need, Saudi Arabia? Okay, let's see if we could accommodate. As we're on a war footing right now, and we're still, essentially, I think that's almost like 70% already controlled by the IDF in Gaza right now. So they look to be closing out that loose end. And what I tell my audience is that before any deal can go down with Saudi Arabia, Gaza has to finish. That has to, guaranteed, has to finish. That cannot be going on, because one of the other things I was going to talk to you about in a question was, you've mentioned this on other interviews that I've seen you on promoting this book, and that is the Saudi Arabian public would not allow, they wouldn't like MBS for doing a deal with Israel while the Gaza war is still going on, and they're seeing that. Because you say that, their younger audience might not be aware of all the previous wars within the region, but they're currently seeing Gaza, and that's not a good play right now for the Saudi public.
Yeah, I mean, I think young Saudis, didn't really, they weren't alive for the 67 war, the 73 war, the 78 peace. I mean, none of that. So Israel wasn't an enemy, it was just a country. But having watched the Gaza war on social media, at least the polls show that the overwhelming majority of young Saudis are against recognizing Israel. I think, the Crown Prince obviously doesn't want to take a risk with his life. But my feeling is that when he has what he thinks he needs, he will be able to sell it to the young people. The bigger concern is, does he do something that rallies the religious and his royal cousins who did not like being pushed aside or locked up in the Ritz-Carlton? And, there's some kind of something comes together against him. I think, Netanyahu's going to be in the U.S. on Monday.
Yes. He's
And
actually, I think, in the air right now.
yeah.
As we speak on Sunday here.
And, I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if there was some progress or some discussion, at least, about Syria and Israel. Because the Syrian leader desperately needs he needs money, he needs know-how, he needs a lot of stuff to try to put together a country that Assad completely destroyed.
Yep.
So, the Israelis have a big reason to want peace there. How much they want to control a bigger swath of Syria for their own protection. Whether he
like
can,
with the Golan Heights too. I think that is a big key figure right now in the news.
but Israel's not going to give up the Golan Heights.
That was the point. Yeah.
So I think, if he can just accept that, and maybe they'll give up taking any more, and you could have a deal. And obviously, I believe the Crown Prince would be very supportive of that, because he really, I think, does see himself as one of the people seeking to save Syria. But on the other hand, the Israelis, Netanyahu, people say, is considering calling an election, and his own right-wing coalition members say that if he, gives up anything in Gaza, they'll bring down the government.
Yeah.
I tend to doubt that it's intended to intimidate him. But a lot could go wrong in Israel if you wind up having the government brought down, or an election where Netanyahu, for whatever reason, loses, and whoever comes next is maybe easier for the Saudis to deal with, maybe not, because it's new. So I think at some level time is of the essence. That Trump, I tend to think like you that it will not be this year, that it's just for Saudi-Israeli, that it's just not going to happen. But again, the Crown Prince has a big incentive because he is not getting the foreign direct investment he needs. Tourism is the major industry he's trying to build. And I think the absence of a public peace with Israel and lower tensions throughout the region affects people's willingness to invest in in Saudi Arabia, and their willingness to visit the country. Tourism is up, but when you've just had this war with Iran and the Gaza war going on, it is not rising as much as they hope.
Yes, and listen, you mentioned tourism, and that's another question I was going to ask you in this regard, because we know that Saudi Arabia is ridiculous when it comes to religious tourism because of being the two custodians of Mecca and Medina. That itself is I think anything more than any country can handle, really. But if you wanted to add on to that, I think I've heard you talk about this on a previous interview, in light of not only the scriptures but also the placement of Saudi in regards to ancient lands, because Neom is an area where a lot of people think in Tabuk is the location for the real Mount Sinai of Jabal Maqta. Do you ever see that actually opening up from Saudi Arabia, or do they want to keep that under wraps? Because they do have it fenced off for the most part.
No, you can go there. I went to Jebel Lows, and you can see the well of Moses, and all of that is fascinating because as I wrote in this book in 2009, when I was writing the first book, I said to a minister, because my church minister told me, did you realize that, there are people that think that this spot in Saudi Arabia is the real Mount Sinai? So I asked if I could visit, because as I understand it, some Christians think this is the real Mount Sinai. And you would have thought I had, put an ant in his pants. I mean, he just, and he said, we don't want Christians going there. I mean, in a hushed voice,
Yeah.
But MBS has opened up all of that area, the Nabatean ruins in Saudi Arabia that are that are very nice, but considered the poor cousin to Petra in Jordan. Used to be closed because the very religious, I lived with a very religious woman for the first book, and I went to visit her during working on this book, and I told her that I had visited Madan Salah, and she said, oh, I could never do that because it's cursed. So I asked Mohammed bin Salman's kind of chief Islamic guidance, Mr. Isa, is that true? And he said, no, it's, if it were, I wouldn't go there. And if it were cursed, and I've been, and, but it's part of but anyway, MBS has simply ignored all of that and opened up the whole area to tourists, and there are a lot of pretty places to see. And then it's up near Neom, where his vision of Israeli-Saudi technology development, AI, data warehousing, etc., coming together is. So it's a very important part of the country to him.
Yeah, whenever I see articles speaking on his tourism push, I always tell myself, this should be a simple addressing of just not even, you don't probably have to promote it as much, but just, not only open it up, but maybe market it a little bit. But I do know that it would probably repel some of the Christian sentiment, because the way I see it is, if you promoted it, not only would it attract Jews, religious Jews, but also Christians, because it has to do with Moses. And,
he has encouraged Christians to visit. I've forgotten the pastor that he met with, but there are Christian visitors increasingly to Saudi Arabia, because you can literally get a visa online, no waiting in line or having to get special permission, as I did, for many, many, many. Well, I still do get a visa, but it's very easy to get into the country. There's not alcohol for sale, which would obviously make it more appealing to some visitors. But I noticed the last time I was in Riyadh, they now have wine menus in restaurants.
Interesting.
And it is non-alcoholic wine.
Okay.
From Spain, but and they are now selling real alcohol in Riyadh in the diplomatic quarter to, foreigners at embassies. So it's, it is a creeping adjustment for the population, and most people believe that it will be sold at all of those Red Sea developments, Shindala and Trojena, where they're going to have the Asian Winter Olympics, and because it's far from conservative Riyadh, and it's where a lot of tourists and foreigners will gather.
And that's interesting. You mentioned Sindala, which is one of these islands that I recall I reported on when it was first announced, saying that it was somewhat of a deal, not only between Egypt but also Israel, to kind of get that deal done so he can have ownership essentially of those two islands, which has now become Sindala. I think one of the first project that has been completed so far, and that leads into another question, because we're halfway into Vision 2030 in 2025. How do you see his projects panning out, and also in general, and which do you think are the most likely to succeed and the least likely projects to succeed?
Well, I think one of the ones that will succeed is a place called Qiddiya, which is like a Six Flags writ large, near about 45 kilometers from Riyadh. So, but it's got a Formula One racetrack. It's got the entertainment area. It's got expensive housing, and you can sit in the restaurant and watch the cars, the Formula One racetrack go by.
Yeah.
So it's not your normal everyday thing you could see somewhere else, but it's close to Riyadh, so it's easy for people to get to. And a lot of Saudis do now travel. When I was traveling, I went to all 13 provinces when I was doing that first book, and Saudis did not move around the country then. I mean, it was just you lived wherever you lived, and if you traveled, you might go to Bahrain or you might go to Europe, but you didn't go elsewhere in the kingdom, hardly at all. People in Riyadh didn't want to go to Jeddah. People in Jeddah didn't want to be caught dead in Riyadh. And now Saudis, wherever I go, I run into other Saudis. So I think Qiddiya attracts them. That whole Al Ula area up near Naum, with the Nabatean ruins and on up to Moses Well and Jebel Lows, and you see Saudis there visiting. I think now that they can move around, they're curious about what's in the rest of their country. A lot of the big projects are, underway but not finished, so there's not yet a but there are a lot of new entertainment sites. I have a whole chapter in this book on fun in Saudi Arabia. I mean, fun was a dirty word to the religious clerics, and now it's just so interesting to walk around Riyadh Boulevard, or they have a place that's sort of like Disney Epcot Center, with a lot of different
geographic regions.
Spain, Egypt, the pyramids, etc. And you see people, they always seem to take their children out, little children being pushed, and women throwing basketballs at, trying to win a big yellow velour banana that's 5 feet long. I don't know what the kids do with it, but, people just having fun, which just boggles my mind. And you see, you have your child's face painted like a cat. The whole idea of creating a human likeness is against Wahhabi Islam, because you're playing God to draw a face. So but the woman painting the cat's faces on kids, as I say in the book, doesn't look like she's afraid of going to hell, and the kids don't either. It's just a completely different society. I think it will take a lot longer than 2030 for it to succeed or fail. And some of it obviously will succeed well, and some of it probably will not. But I think he's got, the world is going to continue to need oil far beyond what the climate change people want.
Yeah.
And he's creating a lot of renewable energy too, both to use so that he has more oil to sell, and to sell the renewable energy to other people. I'm a Texan, so I will use this analogy, but I think he is a bit like the state of Texas. It used to be heavily dependent on oil revenue, and it, now is much less dependent because it built up a lot of industries in the state. And it's also the biggest producer of renewable energy, even though it is still the biggest producer in the U.S. of oil. So it is both the biggest oil producing state and the biggest renewable energy producing state. And I think that's basically his ambition, is to have both of those, and then to have all of these other developments that that's the reason for all the sports investments that people like to call sports washing. And it doubtlessly does help cleanse the human rights reputation. But the real purpose is not to cleanse their reputation. It's to draw tourists into the country to spend money and create jobs for young people. And the number of women working in tourist sites, again, amazes me, because Saudis used to not want to do any kind of, what I would call menial work. I mean, anything besides sit behind a desk. But there are lots of tour guides, maitre d's in restaurants, women taking orders, waiting tables, and they're very happy to do it.
And in light of what you just said, one of the things that really caught my attention from him trying to diversify from oil is seeing companies, like you said, even by the Red Sea, companies like Sear and like Lucid that are producing electronic vehicles in Saudi Arabia, which to a lot of people should be counterintuitive. It's like, wait a minute, aren't you the oil people? No, obviously they want to diversify. They just don't want it to be oil. And that I could imagine was a big driving force behind his Vision 2030, is to stop being so dependent on this one revenue source. They have to diversify. And I think clearly he has to make peace in the region, not only with everybody, but just with Israel too, right there, his neighbor, in order to, he has mentioned this, to be sustainable with this vision of prosperity. But that goes in line with another question, because you did bring up Sadat. I remember this caught my attention big time in early 2020, where an article came out saying that if he made peace with Israel, somebody in his own family would probably kill him. He actually said that. And I'm just like, interesting. So let's just say he reaches normalization with Israel. Do you see it being some sort of danger like that with Sadat, that got assassinated for making peace with Israel?
I think if you look at history, Sadat got assassinated for making peace. Rabin also got assassinated. The problem is, I'm sure the Crown Prince has incredible security. But you never know. King Faisal was murdered in 1975 by his own nephew, going through a receiving line, and he was angry because Faisal's troops had murdered his brother for protesting the introduction of television into the country. So he just shot him. I'm assuming that in those days, kind of, if you were a prince, you could join in a receiving line. And this one was friends with, I believe it was a visiting oil minister. So that's another excuse for how he got there. But you never, ever know, So I think that is, as I said earlier, I think the greater problem, not to do anything that brings the royals and the religious together, either, to try to knock him off or to replace him or to literally assassinate him.
Did he ever express that with you? Well,
No,
no.
no.
Yeah, I was
No.
going to mention a couple last questions so we can wrap it up. But one of the questions that I really wanted to know about in your 7 meetings with the Crown Prince, what are some of the more surprising things that he mentioned that kind of caught you off guard? That you could actually have on record. I don't know if there's stuff probably off record, but anything you can have on record that that really surprised you when you met him and you thought to yourself, "Wow, didn't see that coming from MBS."
Well, that he was going to recognize Iran.
My jaw was the same as yours. My jaw, when I read that, I said, "Whoa, didn't see this coming at all."
Restore diplomatic relations with Iran was the most kind of jaw-dropping thing. But I was startled the first time I went in. I had seen his picture all over, but he was bareheaded and wearing a white thobe. And, he comes from behind his desk, sticks his hand out and says, welcome, and motions me to a seat. And, that sort of, I was surprised that when you ask a question, you got an answer. He would occasionally give a bit of history before the answer. He kept trying in that first meeting to say that people were, calling him a one-man show, and he wasn't a one-man show. He was just a part of a group, and that they were doing that to try to get him, make him unpalatable, that he's a one-man show. But, so, I was just, I was surprised by the, I knew he was young, but by the kind of youthful confidence and charisma, because most Saudi ministers are King Abdullah, any of the senior Saudis I had ever met at a level with him, were, stiff. They had a lot of retainers walking around them, so you couldn't actually get them to focus on you. Handing pieces of paper and passing tea, and and he, he served the obligatory tea. He didn't personally serve it; he had one serve it. But then we just got right into talking, and he was quite open and forthcoming. The other time that surprised me is, I guess maybe the last time I saw him, I walked in and he had a big smile and shook hands and said, "Long time no see," because this was through the COVID period. I was wearing my black abaya. My head was uncovered, but I had on the black abaya. And he said, "You don't have to wear that." And I said, "Yes." And then just got right into asking questions. But, it's sort of like he is very focused on detail. And I think he would probably be happier if somebody like me didn't wear an abaya, because that would indicate that, more that things are changing. But I find it comfortable to wear because most Saudi women are still wearing them, not all head covered up, but it's just easier to not stand out. I probably stand out anyway as an American, but at least you have on the black clothing.
Yes. And so we can wrap it up. One of the things that I was interested about is from your perspective of being in the Middle East for such a time, the advent of the technology, the AI, for instance, what really caught my attention with MBS and also his push with Vision 2030 are all these global conferences on the topics of biotech, finance, cybersecurity, AI, tech. I know for me, and this is a little bit of background on me. I grew up in middle school to high school having a friend from Saudi Arabia, first generation Saudi Arabia born citizen that immigrated to America, and he would tell me about all his Saudi upbringing, and it was very, very religious, very strict. He would tell me he mentioned a lot of things about like Chop Chop Square and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Came to the capital punishment and stuff like he would never forget about after seeing. But I think after 2020, and especially with this push of Vision 2030, what's your perspective on that push in line of like, I'll tell you right now, most Americans, they might just see Saudi as an oil-rich country, but not as a country that all of a sudden is now pushing all. A lot of people should ask themselves, like, what happened to the Silicon Valley? What happened to America? What happened to San Francisco? All of a sudden, not only are you having Saudi Arabia positioning themselves as the oil brokers that they were, but a peace broker and also a technology broker. Like the they want to be a global AI hub. How do you see that playing out? And is that all because of MBS?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I am considerably older than you, so AI is not my specialty. But, he's very technologically capable. As I quote in the book that people say that he played a lot of video games as a child because there was no entertainment in the country at that time, and that he felt that anything you could do in a video game, you could do in real life if you put your mind to it. So he has this kind of expansive view of what one can do. And he seems, he hosts, as you say, every kind of health, finance, technology. I can't even name them all.
It's broad. It's very broad. And for anybody watching the Middle East, I mean, since 2020, it's like, what happened? All of a sudden, they are on a very interesting trajectory that was never in play before. I'm sure you definitely can understand that.
Yeah.
You're like, just happened with all these global conferences, and that's the thing I see tied to it is global like global AI summit, global biotech summit, global cybersecurity, and I'm just like, man, he wants to go global. That's for sure. That's for sure.
No, right. He is, he is seeks to be at the center of everything, not personally visible talking, although he does that well. I mean, he had a robot at one of the finance things, and he had the robot walk around the stage, and he talked about, the difference in modern cell phones. And, he's highly technological. And he says, when I asked him once, who influences you? Who do you look to? He said, I tell my children, don't follow me. You're going to need your own new ideas. And that I love my father, but I am not he. He seeks to be a creative thinker, and he's got the confidence. And he seems to be an incredibly hard worker. One of the times I was there, he has all these piles of paper on a table in front of where he sat and I sat. Even though he's very technologically competent, he seems to prefer to read information the old-fashioned way, and so I mean, he's a workaholic. He says that he doesn't sleep every night. He sleeps 12-hour stretches, but not every night, so he has meetings. Many of my meetings have been in the wee hours of the morning. And, his ministers have to be there at all hours of the day and night. I mean, he's got energy like he's running on oil or on renewable energy.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, listen, it's funny you mentioned that because one of the things that I heard from Trump is asking the prince directly while in front of him, saying, "Do you sleep at night, Mohammed? How do you sleep?" Because apparently this is probably well known among the upper echelon there. But one of the last couple of questions I wanted to ask is this. He does do a lot of lavish spending, and we talked about Christianity recently. One of the things that definitely caught my attention with this man is how he purchased the world's most expensive painting, a supposed Da Vinci painting of Jesus, the Savior of the world. What do you make of that in light of him being a leader of the birthplace of Islam, buying, I mean, this should strike anybody's attention in regards to like, what is a man from the birthplace of Islam, custodian of Mecca and Medina, buying this painting with a very specific depiction, not of the Prophet Isa of Islam. It's of the Christian Jesus, the Savior of the world. How do you take that? Because let me tell you, that one really caught my attention.
I think, yeah, obviously mine too. I think that is the kind of stuff he does to get attention.
Oh, he got attention. He got it.
I mean,
there's a couple of documentaries on that.
Repeating, he's not like Trump, who doesn't want to stand up and command, but stuff like that he knows is going to leave people, like diplomatic relations with Iran, buying the painting of Jesus. I asked the culture minister, who's a good friend of his, where is that painting? What are you going to do with it? And obviously nobody seems to be authorized to talk about it because at least I haven't any intelligence on it. I would love to see it. And I was told once that he keeps it on his yacht. Yeah. But that seems a dangerous place to keep a whatever it was, $4 million painting. Yeah. But
it was $400 million with
$400 million. Yes, okay.
And yeah, I did hear the same thing, that it was on Serene. So, like I said, this man has some lavish spending. The world's most expensive house in France, the world's most expensive painting with the Da Vinci Salvator Mundi, the world's most expensive yacht. And I did hear about that as well. That's like, it was already odd enough, but then they said that it was on his yacht floating in the Red Sea. And I'm just like, okay. I don't know what he's trying to tell us here, but and of course, there was still that ambiguity of having that line of separation with one of his representatives actually doing the bidding and not MBS being the one on paper. But that, I just wanted to hear a little bit. I do want to see where it's at, where it's going to show up. There were talks that, if Riyadh builds a museum, it's going to be there for the Mona Lisa of the Middle East. That's essentially, I did hear that in a previous BBC interview from one of his close confidants. He did say that they were pretty much open in regards to, yes, it was MBS, but he wants it so that it can draw people in with the tourism. So it's like he wants it to be.
They're trying to make art one of the central draws to Saudi Arabia. So I've forgotten, where is there is a place that they are trying to make into a an art art exhibit kind of place where people
one that all mirrors the mirrored one, the mirrored building in Alula.
That's the line, the one with mirrors. You mean that's 100?
There's like there's a venue. I've seen some concerts there.
Oh, the music, Maria.
That's the one.
Yeah, he has his own private box there, which I got to go into. He obviously wasn't in it, but he can come in and go without anyone, seeing him. But that's I went to a concert there. That's of the Chinese pianist Ling Ling, I think.
Yeah.
And you sit in the mirrors reflect the mountains behind, but when you sit there looking through the glass, the guy's playing the piano, and behind you are these pink lit kind of, I don't know if there's sandstone or what, but
Sandstone, like
it's beautiful, really
very
beautiful.
unique. Very unique, very unique.
Yep.
Now, to close it out, I did want to tell my audience, don't forget to check out your book, The Man Who Would Be King, Mohammed bin Salman and the Transformation of Saudi Arabia. That's actually being released this week, so it's very timely. It's coming out Tuesday. I've already pre-ordered it on Amazon, but where would you suggest people go pick it up? Is it just Amazon or any other bookstore?
Yeah, Amazon has it, I know, and I think, bookstores like Barnes and Noble will have it, but it's easy to get on Amazon.
Yes, most definitely. I already have it pre-ordered, and I do have the ebook coming in. So even before it gets shipped out, I'm going to start perusing it, and I'm always looking for little caveats here and there, especially from perspectives like yours. But I guess one last question before we close out. In the short term, where do you see MBS, and in the long term, where do you see King Mohammed?
Mohammed. I think he will remain energetic and decisive. He's got to, the vision is out there and it's underway. Now he has to bring it home and continue to protect the country. That is a big task. If he can also get peace with Israel and really develop a prosperity corridor in Saudi Arabia through Israel and to the Mediterranean, that would have a big impact on the region. I hope that he is king for a long time, because while, as the Bible says, all of us have sinned and come short of the glory of the Lord, and he is right among us as having his faults, that he does have a drive to get things done that the country needs, because it had so many 2 decades of half-dead kings, and he is out there doing things. So I think he is good for the country, that because he's doing what they need done, and hopefully he will survive and thrive until he does get most of it done.
Got it. Yeah, well, I think we'll end it there. That was
okay.
A revealing interview. Thank you, Karen, for your time. And like I said, listen, when the book comes out, you'll definitely hear my review on the report as well. I'll be talking about some of the tidbits that definitely caught my attention from reading the book.
Okay.
But again, thank you for your time. And listen, if you ever want to come back on, feel free to do so. Just contact me and we'll have you back on again.
Okay.
My audience knows we talk about the Middle East, but he's one of the key figures that we're keeping our eyes on. But with that said, we'll end the interview, and thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.